talking to folks that are getting started, like, hey, what's your channel play? Like, what VARs are you working with? And if the answer is like none, then you might want to start looking at a Carosoft, look at, you name the entity. And then on the accreditation side, right? Like, if you don't have that expertise in-house, you don't understand how the ATO process works, how FedRAMP works, like an organization like Second Front, I'm looking at Game Warden, it is probably worth your bang to move into a platform like that to get the accreditation platform passes to your product. I want to just come back to one of the first points you made of like the reality of being in a startup, right? Because I think people have, whatever, movie, pop culture, what have you. It's like, oh yeah, cool. You're going to go to a startup and it's just going to be all sweetness and light and ping pong and, whatever. Startups are work, right? Anybody that's been in a startup, like it's funny. I had a close buddy of mine who's still in government, and we were talking one day, and he's like, you work a lot. He's like, are you ever off? And I'm like, not really. Like, you have to maintain that balance, right? But I think there's that, like, so just that perception of what it's like in a startup, and then reality. Like, if you want to get into the space, like, know that it's work, right? But then coming back to the larger question, right? I think fundamentally, I think it comes down to this idea, and I think you talked about it. I wanted to start this whole thing with a longtime listener, first-time caller, because I think I've listened to every one of your podcasts.
I've never listened to one of my podcasts, so if you're about to quote me on something, I have no idea.
No, I wouldn't quote you. I mean, I'm quoting, I think it was Brian Raymond. But you had a conversation with somebody
big old brain
about like continuing to, like, the new things you learn along the way, right? And continue having that, like, curiosity to learn. And that's like, I'm always kind of, digging into some new topic or, whatever, reading a new book or what have you. And I think when it comes to wanting to do business in this space, and I think it's almost harder if you're dual use, right? Because I think, for the dual use entity, taking the time to understand those requirements, the accreditation, the compliance, the contracting ins and outs, the whole, CIBR, we can talk CIBRs if we get there. But I think, making the time and having the right people in the right roles to get proficient, so you can, in advance of getting to a conversation where somebody's like, holy smokes, this is really cool tech. How do I get to you? What contract vehicles are you on? What networks are you accredited on? Right? That you have to take the time to do that up front. And I think on the commercial side, like, one of the things I'm worried about is, as you look at the market, is like, the speed to the speed to ROI, right? And that there's a lot of work that is required to do business in this space. And if you're a dual use founder or a dual use board, sitting on the board or VC or PE or what have you, it's like, okay, how long again? Wait, you said how long until we think that there's going to be a contract opportunity, and how much work is required? And okay, we're going to let's do away with our whole federal, public sector practice, and we're going to go all in on commercial, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a great sort of juxtaposition of, I think, the challenge that, whether it's dual use or it's like the federal team in sort of a more mature sort of commercial SaaS, like an enterprise SaaS play. Mm-hmm. I think there's this notion of like, yeah, hey, I've got to go like respond to all these RFPs. And you're like, okay, like that's a way, but like if someone's not writing an RFP like for your product, like what are you responding to?
Yeah, what's your key win?
Always gets me confused. I'm like, all right, we'll unpack that later.
Yeah.
But you've got organizations like Carosoft and like a bunch of different VARs that already have contracts there. So to your point about sort of knowing the rules, right? Mm-hmm. There's two. There's the how do folks get to you? Mm-hmm. And how do you get your software to them?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a procurement side of it, and there's like a security and compliance accreditation side of it.
Well, that's what, and just to tag in, and actually, like, not to, since I'm on your podcast, I guess I'll give you an unsolicited plug here, but I think
marketing, pay attention.
But I would use you as an example, and Carosoft as an example, right? If you're leading a federal team, or if you're thinking about the federal go-to-market, I think there is still that, the direct sale approach versus that competitive approach, right? And I think I would say, and this is obviously a hot topic, and I loved Ben Van Roo's discussion with you, that I think he took data and kind of proved what all of us who have been in the space for a while have known for a long time about the reality of the CIBR mills and all that kind of stuff, right? But I would still argue the SIBR program, right, is fantastic for people that want to, you have a cool tech, you want to bring it to market, you start in the way it was intended, right? Start phase one, you move to a phase two if there's value add, you can move to StratFi, or, and then ultimately the goal is phase three production, right? And as opposed to just, we're going to bid on 5, SIBRs a quarter and you get the contract and then never actually roll it out past that, right? So anyway, but coming back to, and I forget where the heck I was going with that.
Talking about sort of the two-sided coin of like procurement and accreditation, and thinking about, hey, there are ways to sort of flatten the curve on each of those.
Thank you. See, I get so excited about SIBR, I forgot where the heck I was going. No, but I think, talking to folks that are getting started, like, hey, what's your channel play? Like, what VARs are you working with? And if the answer is like none, then you might want to start look at a Carousel, look at, you name the entity. And then on the accreditation side, right? Like, if you don't have that expertise in-house, you don't understand how the ATO process works, how FedRAMP works, like an organization like Second Front and looking at Game Warden, and, it is probably worth your bang to, move into a platform like that to get the accreditation platform passes to your product, right? And so I think that supporting ecosystem around, hey, how do we help one another, that whole like rising water lifts all boats, or whatever, rising tide lifts all, you know what I mean? Like, I think
Navy calls it a ship.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, I'm
dorks.
I'm showing my ground dragging, my knuckle dragging. But yeah, like I think those enablement kind of functions are super important to be successful, right?
Now I'm going to return the favor. You gave me a little marketing plug that the marketing gods at Second Front will be happy with. What are you guys working on? Sort of what problem are you solving? What's got you excited about Virtualitics?
Oh, thanks, dude. Yeah. So, so a couple of things. I mean, once, I've been over there now a little over 2 months, and I think, a few things, and I'll hit them. I'll keep this succinct, but one is like product, right? But then two, at this stage of this stage of my life, like, it's beyond, there's other things other than just a cool gee whiz product, right? And I think mission and team are the other two things for me.
But you were going to say nap time and, some porridge at like 4 p.m.
That's key, man. If I don't get my nap, I'm super grumpy. But yeah, so I mean, for the team and for the product, right? So the company was founded in 2016, decade of research at Caltech in partnership with NASA JPL. And the foundational sort of concept and how we're positioning it in the market is this concept of intelligent exploration of your data, right? And why did I, when I first started, talking to the team and seeing the product, why did I think that was important? Because I think, and I'd love your thoughts on this and make it more of a conversation than me just telling you all the things that I think are cool. I think you've heard for a long time, department senior leaders talking about, hey, our problem when it comes to data is not collection, right? Like, by and large, right? We collect a tremendous amount of data. The challenge is in data management. The challenge is in analytics. We know there's a lot more insights in the data that we've collected than we're able to get access to, right? So that's kind of one. And then the second one, I think, is just the human piece, right? Of like, how do we get more how do we upskill our analysts and get them to a higher sort of level of performance? Because actual data scientists are harder to come by, takes longer to train, more expensive, sometimes have a penchant for leaving for the private sector, right? So, so I think those two pieces, when I saw the concept of intelligent exploration, this idea of really a low, no code sort of analytics layer that sits on your data, that has our, sort of AI routines embedded, that allows an analyst to get, take the data and then, move it into these 3D visualizations. And there's a cool VR component to it as well, because one of our founders comes from a data science background, the other comes from VR. But really that idea of enabling analysts to take advantage of existing AI routines that our team has embedded in the product to start, identifying connections, identifying anomalies and surfacing those insights, right? And there's a whole bunch of cool use cases that we're doing, we're working in the predictive maintenance space and taking a very different angle on that than other folks are, and doing cyber and intelligence and all this kind of stuff. So product's super cool. When I saw it, I was like, I don't know. And not that I'm, I consider myself incredibly deep, from the first time I saw it. But as I started looking at who else is in the space, I was like, I think that's a gap in the market. And I think this is going to really resonate in terms of those two problem areas you've been hearing from DOD for a long time, right? And then the other piece is just mission, like mission impact. I think, the team, I was blown away by, the folks that I'm able to work with, the focus on the mission, and then just like, kind of, showing up as good humans, right? So yeah, that's a little bit about the company and why I'm here.
Yeah, I mean, timing couldn't be better, right? There's the rise of sort of like data warehousing and data clouds and your Snowflakes of the world and sort of everybody else. I think there's a recognition that, there's not a collection issue in the department. I think there's a discovery issue, and that's a mix of just poor form, a bunch of siloed builds, right? Like they cut a bunch of contracts over the years, not reading any of the clauses in like vendors' EULAs, and ended up having to go like buy their data back from some people.
Yep.
So as you're thinking about how to make that discoverable and actually provide insight into it, I think the value is clear.
Yeah.
I think the big thing, to your point, is thinking through how can you increase the variety of environments you can run that in, and then can you sort of cross correlate across, right? Like that's where you almost get it like this multi-level security sort of challenge on, hey, well, what if we could show you issues if you've got your viz on, yellow, red, and green, and you've got a discrepancy across some key feature.
Yeah.
Did you're the same way I used to do it, right? Like right now I'm like either switching toggles on and off, or I'm like taking CDs out and like loading them back in.
Exactly.
There's like no way to normalize that. So that gets me excited about sort of the future of what you guys are doing in the mission.
Yeah.
Because that is a wildly underserved capability right now.
Yeah. 100%.